The light from the hallway spilled into the kitchen, a single pale stripe across the cool tile floor. It was 2 in the morning, the kind of quiet that only exists when the rest of the world is asleep. I hadn't meant to be snooping. I was just looking for a Tylenol, my head pounding from a tension that had settled in our house like a permanent fog. Her purse was on the counter, uncharacteristically open. A flash of white paper caught my eye, tucked into a side pocket as if hidden in a hurry. It was an envelope from a credit card company I didn't recognize. My heart started a low, heavy drum against my ribs. I told myself to close the purse and walk away. It wasn't my business. But the coldness between us for the past week had created a chasm, and I felt like I was standing on one edge, staring into an abyss I didn't understand. My hand moved on its own, my fingers closing around the thin paper. I pulled it out. The statement was folded in 3. As I unfolded it, the numbers seemed to leap off the page, illuminated by that single stripe of light. The balance due wasn't a few $100s from an impulsive shopping trip. It was a 5-figure number. A number so large it made the air leave my lungs in a silent rush. I leaned against the counter, the smooth, cold granite doing nothing to steady the tremor in my hands. I looked at the list of transactions. Store after store I didn't recognize. High-end boutiques. Online retailers with names that sounded expensive. It was a history of a life I knew nothing about, paid for with money we didn't have. I folded the paper, my movement stiff and slow, and slid it back into her purse, tucking it deep into the pocket where I'd found it. I closed the clasp, the soft click echoing in the silent house. I walked back down the hall to our bedroom. Chloe was sleeping, her breathing soft and even. She looked so peaceful, so familiar. The same woman I had loved for 15 years. But as I stood there, watching her in the dim light, a terrifying thought took root in my mind. I didn't know her at all. To understand how we got there, to that moment of shattering discovery, we have to go back 2 weeks. Back to when I thought the biggest change on our horizon was my own retirement. 20 years. That's how long I'd worn the uniform of the United States Air Force. It's a long time to do anything, but in the military, it's an entire lifetime. It becomes your identity. You're not just Liam Carter, you're Master Sergeant Carter. Your life moves in a rhythm of deployments, training, and relocations. Your friends are the men and women who understand that rhythm. Your family learns to adapt to it, to live with the constant hum of uncertainty. Now, at 37, that chapter was closing. The paperwork was filed, the final salute was on the horizon. My pension was secured. For the first time in my adult life, I was about to be just Liam. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. My main goal, the one I'd held on to through long, lonely nights in Afghanistan and Iraq, was simple: I wanted to be a husband and a father. A full-time, present, everyday husband and father. We lived in a quiet suburb of San Antonio, a place where the lawns were green and the houses had a comfortable, cookie-cutter similarity. It was a good place to raise kids. Our son, Ethan, was 14. He was technically my stepson, Chloe's child from a brief relationship before we met, but I had raised him since he was a baby. He was quiet and intense, lost in the world of teenage angst and video games. Then there was Maya, our daughter. At 12, she was a spark of light, all bright smiles and boundless energy. They were good kids. And they were growing up. The school bus rumbled to a stop at the end of our driveway at 7:30 every morning and dropped them back off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They didn't need someone to tie their shoes or cut their sandwiches into fun shapes anymore. They were becoming independent, navigating their own social circles and schoolwork. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, they had after-school activities, and I'd swing by to pick them up on my way home from the base. They were building their own lives, and I was so proud of them. But their independence had created a shift in our household dynamic, a shift I was only just beginning to process. For 15 years, Chloe's official, all-consuming title had been stay-at-home mom. When the kids were little, it was a job that never ended. It was sleepless nights, endless diapers, scraped knees, and a constant, demanding presence. I was gone so much, and she held our world together. I never, ever took that for granted. But now, things were different. Between 7:30 a.m. and 3 p.m., the house was empty and quiet. I knew her routine because she'd sometimes mention it over dinner. She'd go to the gym or a yoga class. She'd meet a friend for coffee. She'd scroll through social media, maybe do some window shopping at the mall, or get her nails done. She'd be home in time to start dinner, though she often said she hated cooking. More often than not, we'd end up ordering takeout, a habit that was starting to weigh on both our waistlines and our wallet. As my retirement drew closer, a plan began to form in my mind. It felt logical, practical, and fair. It felt like the perfect solution for our family's next chapter. I would step into the role of the at-home parent. I could be the one to see the kids off, to be there when they got home. I didn't mind cooking and cleaning. In the military, you learn to be orderly and efficient. I could make sure we were eating healthy, home-cooked meals. We'd save a fortune on takeout. And Chloe, she could get a job. She could find something for herself. She had never worked, never had a career of her own. She married me when she was 22, already a mother to Ethan. Her whole life had been dedicated to us. I thought this would be a chance for her to discover a new side of herself, to build something that was hers and hers alone. I spent days thinking about how to bring it up. I knew it had to be handled delicately. I didn't want it to sound like a demand or a criticism. I wanted it to feel like an exciting new plan we were building together. I chose a Tuesday evening. The kids were in their rooms, the murmur of a TV and the clicking of a game controller forming the background noise of our home. Chloe was on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, a half-smile on her face as she watched some video. The lamplight softened the lines of her face, and for a moment, my heart ached with love for her. She was my rock, the constant in my chaotic life. I sat down in the armchair across from her. "Hey," I said, my voice softer than I intended. She looked up, her smile widening. "Hey, you. You're quiet tonight." "Just thinking," I said. "About the future. About us." That got her full attention. She put her phone down on the cushion beside her. "Okay. Good thoughts, I hope." "Great thoughts," I said, trying to sound confident and reassuring. "I've been thinking a lot about what happens after I'm officially out. And I have an idea I wanted to run by you." I took a breath. This was it. The kids are getting so big now. They're practically self-sufficient. And I'm going to be home all day. I was thinking, what if we switched roles? She tilted her head, a confused little frown appearing between her eyebrows. "Switched roles? What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, leaning forward, trying to convey my enthusiasm. "I could be the stay-at-home dad. For real. I'll handle the house, the cooking, the grocery shopping, all of it. We could eat better, save money. And you could go find a job. Something you're passionate about. You've never had the chance, and I feel like it's your turn." I finished, a hopeful smile on my face. I expected her to be surprised, maybe a little hesitant, but ultimately pleased. I was offering her freedom, a new beginning. But the reaction I got was not the one I had prepared for. The silence that followed my words was heavy and immediate. Her face, which had been open and warm just moments before, became a closed, unreadable mask. The little frown deepened, and her eyes grew hard. She didn't say anything for what felt like a full minute. She just stared at me, and in her stare, I saw something I'd never seen before, a deep, profound hurt. "So that's what you think I do all day?" she finally said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Nothing?" My own smile faltered. "What? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying the kids are older. The job has changed. It's less demanding now. Less demanding? She let out a short, bitter laugh that had no humor in it. You have no idea. You're gone from sunup to sundown. You fly off for months at a time. I am the one who is here. I am the one who deals with Ethan's moods, with Maya's friendship drama. I'm the one who gets the calls from the school nurse. I'm the one who makes sure they have clean clothes and supplies for their projects. Just because they can pour their own cereal doesn't mean they don't need a mother. I held up my hands, a gesture of peace. Chloe, honey, of course they do. And you're an amazing mother. This isn't about that. This is about an opportunity. For you. For us. I'm just saying that being a stay-at-home mom to teenagers, it isn't a full-time, 40-hour-a-week job anymore. There's room for something else now. For you. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a catastrophic mistake. It was like I had lit a fuse. Her face flushed with color. She stood up, her body trembling with a rage that seemed to come from a deep, hidden well. Not a full-time job, she repeated, her voice rising with each word. Not a full-time job. Do you have any idea how ungrateful you sound? Do you know what I gave up for this family? For your career? I have spent 15 years making sure you had a perfect, stable home to come back to. I have raised 2 children, mostly on my own. And now that there's slightly less work, you want to tell me my job is redundant. You want to kick me out into the workforce like I'm some kind of teenager who needs to get a summer job. That's not what I'm saying. I insisted, standing up too. I'm not trying to kick you out. I'm trying to give you a choice. You're not giving me a choice, Liam, she shot back, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You're telling me that what I do isn't valuable anymore. That it isn't enough. That I'm not enough. The accusation hung in the air between us, sharp and painful. Before I could find the words to deny it, to fix what I had so clearly broken, she turned and walked out of the room. I heard our bedroom door click shut, a sound of absolute finality. I stood alone in the living room, the quiet hum of the house now feeling oppressive. I had walked into that conversation with the best of intentions, with a heart full of love and a logical, well-thought-out plan. I had walked out of it having wounded my wife in a way I didn't understand. I replayed my words in my head. Being a stay-at-home mom to teens isn't a full-time job. It had sounded so reasonable in my mind. Spoken out loud, it had landed like a judgment. A dismissal of her entire life. That was the beginning of the cold. For the next week, she moved around me like I was a piece of furniture she had to avoid. She answered my questions with single words. She didn't look at me during dinner. When I tried to touch her in bed, she would flinch and turn away, creating a tangible distance between us in the dark. The warmth that had always been the foundation of our home had vanished, replaced by a brittle, silent tension. I felt helpless. I tried to apologize, to explain what I really meant, but she would just shake her head and walk away. Just drop it, Liam, she'd say, her voice flat and tired. I felt like I was losing my mind. How had my desire to be more involved in my family led to me being pushed further away than ever? I thought I was offering a gift, a chance for a new life. But she had received it as an insult. The disconnect was a chasm, and I had no idea how to build a bridge. I was a man trained to solve problems, to face down threats and find solutions. But this problem, the one sitting across the dinner table from me with a stranger's eyes, was one I was completely unequipped to handle. It was this confusion, this desperate need for an answer, that led me to her purse in the dead of night, searching for a Tylenol and finding a catastrophe instead. The next morning, the sun rose on a world that felt fundamentally different. I went through the motions. I made coffee, the machine gurgling and hissing in the quiet kitchen. I heard Chloe's alarm go off, then the shower. When she came downstairs, she was already dressed in her yoga pants and a fitted athletic top. She didn't look at me, just moved to the counter to grab a banana. "Morning," I said, my voice sounding rough to my own ears. "Morning," she replied, her tone clipped. She didn't meet my eyes. She just peeled the banana, her movements efficient and detached. Every normal, mundane action was now filtered through the lens of my discovery. The expensive workout gear she wore was that bought with our money, or with secret debt. The perfectly manicured nails tapping on her phone as she checked her messages, another expense on a hidden ledger. I watched her, and the woman I saw was a stranger wearing my wife's face. The anger from our argument had been replaced by a cold, sickening dread. This wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. This was a betrayal of a different magnitude. She finished her banana, tossed the peel in the trash, and grabbed her keys from the hook by the door. Kids are good to go. Maya needs to be reminded about her history project. It's on the calendar. I'll tell her, I said. I'm heading to the gym. And with that, she was gone. The front door closed with a soft click, and I was left alone in the silence, the smell of coffee mingling with the ghost of her perfume. I felt paralyzed. My military training had prepared me for direct threats, for enemies I could see and strategies I could plan. This was different. This was a rot from within. Confronting her felt impossible. How do you even start that conversation? "Hey honey, I was snooping in your purse and found out you've put us in a financial hole so deep we may never climb out." There was no gentle way to say it. The kids came down a few minutes later, a whirlwind of teenage energy and morning grumbles. Maya gave me a hug, chattering about a friend from school. Ethan just grunted a hello and poured himself a bowl of cereal, his eyes already glued to his phone. I tried to talk to him. "Big test today?" I asked. "Nah," he said, not looking up. "Anything interesting happen at school yesterday?" "Not really." The monosyllabic answers were his teenage armor, but today they felt like another wall I couldn't break through. He was Chloe's son. Did he know? Did he see the packages arrive? Was I the only one in the dark? The thought made my stomach twist. I watched them grab their backpacks and head out the door to wait for the bus, their laughter echoing for a moment before the door swung shut, leaving me in silence once again. The house felt huge and empty. I looked at the pristine kitchen, the tidy living room. For years, I had seen it as a sanctuary, a testament to Chloe's hard work. Now, I saw it as a stage, a carefully constructed set for a play I didn't know I was a part of. What was real? I spent the day in a fog, my mind racing. I called my friend Dave. He had retired from the Air Force 6 months before me and was still navigating the strange new world of civilian life. If anyone could understand the feeling of your foundation cracking, it was him. We met at a scruffy little diner halfway between our houses that served coffee strong enough to strip paint. Dave listened patiently as I laid it all out, starting with the argument. I told him about my plan to switch roles, about Chloe's explosive reaction. I left out the part about the credit card statement. I wasn't ready to say that out loud yet. It felt too much like a betrayal. "Man, you stepped in it," he said, shaking his head and taking a long sip of his coffee. "You never, ever tell a woman her job is easy. That's like, rule number 1. "But it's not what I meant, Dave," I said, rubbing my temples. "I was trying to do a good thing. I want to be home. I want her to have a life outside of these 4 walls." "I get it," he said. "I do. But you gotta see it from her side. Her whole identity for 15 years has been military wife and mom. You're taking one of those away by retiring, and now it sounds like you're trying to take the other one away, too. She's probably terrified. Wondering who the hell she's supposed to be now." His words hit me with surprising force. I hadn't thought of it that way. I had seen it as liberation, not an erasure of her identity. Was she scared? Was that what the anger was hiding? "Maybe," I mumbled. But her reaction, it was so extreme. And things are just so cold now. It's like I'm living with a ghost. Give it time, Dave advised, his voice full of the gruff kindness I'd come to rely on. This retirement thing, it's a shock to the whole system, not just for us. It changes everything. She'll come around. Just maybe don't bring up the job thing again for a while. A long while. Just start doing the stuff you said you would. Cook dinner. Do the laundry. Show her you're serious about taking on more. Actions, man. They speak louder than a poorly phrased career suggestion. I left the diner feeling a little better, armed with a new strategy. Dave was right. I needed to show, not tell. I'd prove my intentions through my actions. I'd take over the household, make her life easier, and slowly, the warmth would return. We'd get back to us. That afternoon, I went to the grocery store with a list. I bought ingredients for an actual, home-cooked meal: grilled chicken, roasted asparagus, quinoa. Things Chloe always said we should eat. I got home before she did and started prepping. The methodical chopping of vegetables was calming, the sizzle of chicken in the pan a satisfying sound. She came home around 4. I heard her car in the driveway. She walked in, carrying a shopping bag from a department store I recognized from the mall. "Hey," I said from the kitchen, trying to sound cheerful. "How was your day?" She stopped in the doorway, her eyes landing on the bag in her hand. For a split second, I saw something flash across her face: panic. Guilt, before it was gone, replaced by a neutral mask. She tucked the bag behind her back slightly. "It was fine," she said, her voice flat. "What are you doing?" "Making dinner," I said, gesturing with the tongs. "I figured we could all use a healthy meal." She just nodded, a non-committal sound in her throat. "I'm going to go take a shower." She walked past the kitchen and up the stairs, the shopping bag still clutched in her hand. I never saw it again. We ate dinner in a strained silence. The kids picked up on the tension. Maya tried to fill the quiet with stories about her day, her voice unnaturally bright. Ethan ate quickly, his head down, and asked to be excused the moment he was finished. Chloe barely touched her food. She pushed the asparagus around her plate and offered me a few tight, forced compliments. "This is nice, Liam." "Thank you." The words were polite, but they were empty. There was no connection, no warmth. We were two strangers sharing a table. After she helped clear the Platisa robotic, silent choreography, she retreated to the living room with her phone, and I was left in the kitchen with the remnants of my failed peace offering. My resolve began to crumble. Dave's advice made sense in theory, but in practice, it felt like I was just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. The core problem was still there, a huge, dark shape beneath the surface. And now, the image of that shopping bag, and the flicker of guilt on her face, was burned into my mind. A few days later, my frustration reached a breaking point. The Cold War continued. I was cooking, cleaning, trying my best to be the partner I'd promised I would be, but I was getting nothing back but icy indifference. I felt like I was going crazy, living in a house full of secrets and unspoken resentments. I decided to do something I hadn't done in years: organize our walk-in closet. It was a task born of a need to control something. My side of the closet was, as always, meticulously neat. Shirts hung by color, pants folded in perfect military-issue squares. Her side was a different story. It was an explosion of clothes, shoes, and accessories, a vibrant chaos that I had always found endearing. But today, I didn't see endearing chaos. I saw a mystery I needed to solve. I started on the top shelf, a space that had become a graveyard for old purses and shoeboxes. I pulled down a few boxes, intending to sort through them. Behind a stack of old boots, my fingers brushed against something that shouldn't have been there: the crisp, crinkly plastic of a shopping bag. A new one. I pulled it out. It was from a high-end designer boutique, the kind of place I'd only ever seen in magazines. My heart started to pound, that same low, heavy drum from the night in the kitchen. I opened the bag. Inside, wrapped in layers of tissue paper, was a leather handbag. It was beautiful, I could admit that. The leather was soft as butter. Tucked inside one of the pockets was the receipt. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. The price was nearly $1,000. I sat back on my heels, the air rushing out of my lungs. $1,000. For a purse. We didn't have $1,000 for a purse. We had a mortgage, car payments, and 2 kids who would one day need to go to college. Driven by a terrible certainty, I started to search. I pushed aside hanging dresses and blouses. In the back corner of the closet, tucked away behind a row of winter coats she never wore in Texas, I found it. It wasn't just one bag. It was a hoard. There were at least a dozen shopping bags, all from expensive stores, all carefully hidden. I pulled them out one by one into the middle of the closet floor. A pair of shoes with ridiculously high heels and red soles, the price tag still dangling from the strap, $850. A silk dress, the fabric cool and heavy in my hands, $600. A delicate gold necklace in a velvet box, $1,200. On and on it went. Each item was a fresh blow, a new layer of deceit. None of them looked like they had ever been worn. They were trophies, collected and hidden away. I sat on the floor in the middle of our closet, surrounded by thousands of dollars of secret purchases. The argument about her getting a job seemed so laughably naive now. The cold shoulder, the hurt feelings, it wasn't about her being unappreciated. It was about fear. It was the desperate, panicked reaction of someone whose secret life was about to be exposed. The credit card statement hadn't been an anomaly. It was the tip of the iceberg. And I was now staring at the cold, hard evidence of what lay beneath. The trust that had been the bedrock of our 15-year marriage felt like it was crumbling to dust around me. I looked at the beautiful, expensive, unworn things, and I felt a wave of nausea. My wife wasn't just sad or scared. She was lying. And I had absolutely no idea why. Time ceased to have meaning as I sat on the plush carpet of our walk-in closet. The air was thick with the smell of new leather and expensive perfume, a scent so alien in our simple home that it made me feel dizzy. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage had burned out, leaving behind a hollow, chilling calm. I was Master Sergeant Carter again, assessing a battlefield, cataloging the damage, trying to understand the strategy of an enemy I had slept next to for 15 years. I didn't put anything back. I arranged it. Methodically, I took every hidden item out of its bag and box. I placed the $1,000 purse in the center. I fanned out the receipts I could find like a losing poker hand. I set the red-soled shoes next to it, a stark, violent slash of color against the beige carpet. The silk dress, the gold necklace, a half-dozen other things, I laid them all out in a silent, damning display. It was a museum of our broken trust. I sat there and waited. I heard the garage door rumble open. I heard her car door shut. The jingle of her keys. The soft thud of her purse landing on the kitchen counter. Her footsteps were light on the stairs, the familiar rhythm of her return. My heart didn't beat any faster. It felt like a cold, heavy stone in my chest. She pushed open the bedroom door, humming a little tune. "Liam," she called out. "You home?" "In here," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It sounded like a stranger's. She walked into the closet, a smile on her face that died the instant she saw me. The instant she saw the display on the floor. Her breath hitched. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin looking pale and thin under the warm light. Her eyes, wide with shock, darted from the items on the floor to my face and back again. She clutched the doorframe as if to hold herself up. "What is this?" she whispered, though she knew exactly what it was. I believe the word I'm looking for is, an explanation, I said, my voice dangerously even. I was organizing the closet. Look what I found. She swallowed hard, her composure cracking. You went through my things. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation, a desperate attempt to pivot, to make me the guilty one. I went through our closet, in our house, I corrected her. And I found a secret life. A secret life that, according to a credit card statement I accidentally saw, has cost us tens of thousands of dollars. Money we do not have, Chloe. Tears welled in her eyes, tears of panic, not remorse. You don't understand. Then make me understand, I said, my voice finally rising, the cold calm fracturing into shards of raw pain. Make me understand why you do this. Why you would lie to me. We have a budget. We have goals. A future. Or at least, I thought we did. Was I the only one? It's not like that, she stammered, taking a hesitant step into the room. She wouldn't look at the things on the floor. She only looked at me, her expression pleading. It's my money. I let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. Your money. What money, Chloe? You don't have an income. We have a joint checking account. We have my salary. There is no your money and my money. There is only our money, and you have been setting it on fire. I paid the bills, she shot back, her fear turning to anger, a cornered animal lashing out. I always made sure the mortgage was paid, that the lights stayed on. By taking out secret credit cards. By juggling debt. That's not managing, Chloe, that's hiding. That's a time bomb. And it just went off. I stood up, towering over the pathetic, expensive collection. I felt a surge of adrenaline, the kind I felt before a raid. My voice dropped lower. Last week, you acted like I had mortally wounded you. You accused me of not appreciating you, of thinking what you do is worthless. All because I suggested you get a job. Now I see why. It was never about your hurt feelings, was it? It was about you protecting this. This lie. It's not a lie, she cried, the tears now streaming down her face. You want to know why I bought these things? Fine. It's because when I wear that dress, or hold that bag, for a few minutes, I feel like someone. I'm not just a mom. I'm not just a military wife waiting by the phone. I'm a person who is seen. You have your uniform, your rank, your medals. What do I have, Liam? What is mine? Her words, meant to wound, only confused me more. What do you have? You have this family. You have me. You have Ethan and Maya. We were supposed to be a team. All this time I was deployed, sleeping on a cot in the desert, eating Marie's, missing my kids' birthdays. I did it for us. I did it so we could have this house, this life. And you were here, betraying everything we were building. Betraying, she shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch I'd never heard before. I was the one here alone, raising our children. I was the one fixing the leaky faucet and dealing with parent-teacher conferences and holding Maya when she had a nightmare because she missed her daddy. You got to have a whole other life, a career, respect. I was just the woman who supported it. These things, she gestured wildly at the floor, that they were my escape. They were the only thing that belonged just to me. So you stole from your own family to buy things you were too guilty to even wear. I yelled, the last of my control gone. How does that make any sense? How could you look me in the eye every single day, knowing you were doing this behind my back? The bedroom door creaked open. We both froze. Ethan stood in the doorway. His face was pale, his eyes wide, flicking between my furious face and his mother's tear-streaked one. He took in the Seeneem standing, her crying, the expensive things scattered on the floor like casualties of war. From his perspective, I could see exactly what it looked like. I was the monster, the aggressor, the one making his mother cry. What's going on, he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Chloe let out a sob and rushed to him, wrapping her arms around her son. It's nothing, sweetie. Your dad and I were just having a disagreement. She buried her face in his shoulder, her body shaking. Ethan didn't hug her back. He just stood there, stiff and solid, his eyes locked on mine. And in his gaze, I saw 15 years of my effort to be his father evaporate. I saw a stranger looking at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. Leave her alone, he said. The words were quiet but carried the weight of a judgment. Ethan, this is between your mother and me, I said, my voice strained. It's a grown-up conversation. You're yelling at her, he stated, his voice flat and cold. He gently unwrapped his mother's arms from around him and stepped forward, placing himself between us. He wasn't a little boy anymore. He was nearly as tall as I was, a young man protecting his mother. Stop it. I looked from his defiant face to Chloe, who was hiding behind him, using her son as a human shield. A wave of utter defeat washed over me. I had started this day wanting to understand my wife, and now I had lost my son, too. The united front of our family had shattered, and the pieces had realigned themselves against me. Fine, I said, the single word tasting like ash in my mouth. I felt 100 years old. Fine. I turned and walked past them, out of the closet, out of our bedroom. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away from the wreckage I had created. Or maybe, the wreckage I had only just uncovered. As I walked down the stairs, I could hear Chloe's muffled sobs and Ethan's low, comforting murmurs. They were a team. And I was the outsider. The enemy. I grabbed my keys and walked out the front door into the suffocating Texas heat. The quiet, perfect suburban street looked fake, like a movie set. I got in my truck and just drove. I had nowhere to go. For 20 years, home had been my destination, my anchor. Now, it was the one place in the world I couldn't be. I had spent my career defending my country, but I had completely failed to defend my own family from a threat I never even saw coming. And in trying to fight it, I had managed to turn myself into the villain of my own story. The hum of the truck's engine was the only sound that made sense. I drove aimlessly through the sprawling suburbs of San Antonio, past identical houses with manicured lawns, each a neat little box of secrets I'd never known existed. Every smiling family I saw getting out of a minivan, every couple walking a dog, felt like a personal accusation. They had figured it out, this life. I had only been playing a part. I ended up at a park overlooking the city, the kind of place where teenagers went to sneak cigarettes and couples went to watch the sunset. I just sat in my truck, the engine off, and stared at the skyline as the day began to fade. The anger had subsided, leaving a deep, aching void. Chloe's words echoed in my head. What do I have, Liam? What is mine? I had always thought the answer was obvious, she had us. But maybe I was the one who was wrong. My life had been defined by a clear mission, by promotions, by deployments that, while difficult, gave me a sense of purpose. Her life had been defined by my absence. I had seen her role as noble, as the bedrock of our family. Had she seen it as a cage? A gilded cage, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. The shopping, the lies, were they a desperate attempt to feel in control? To own something tangible when her own identity felt borrowed? It didn't excuse the debt. It didn't excuse the deception. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of something other than betrayal. It was a confusing, painful pity. A sense that I was complicit in her unhappiness in a way I had never considered. I had provided for her, yes. I had loved her. But had I ever truly seen her? I stayed out for hours. I didn't answer her calls or texts, a string of desperate, "Liam, please come home," and "we need to talk." I couldn't face her. I couldn't face the judgment in Ethan's eyes. When I finally drove back, the house was dark except for the porch light, left on like a beacon in a storm. the next few weeks were a new kind of hell. The Cold War was over, replaced by a fragile, terrifying truce. We didn't talk about the closet, the debt, or the argument. We didn't talk about anything of substance at all. We moved through our days with a careful, rehearsed politeness that was more painful than any argument. Pass the salt. Did you remember to take out the trash? Maya has soccer practice at 6. The words were just placeholders for the vast, screaming silence between us. Chloe stopped her shopping trips, or at least, I assumed she did. No new bags appeared. She stayed home more, wandering through the house like a ghost. She cooked dinner every night, simple, joyless meals that we ate in near silence. Her attempts at normalcy were a constant, painful reminder of how abnormal everything had become. She was trying, in her own way, to atone. But without acknowledging the crime, the penance was meaningless. The real casualty was my relationship with Ethan. He treated me with a formal, icy disdain. He spoke to me only when necessary. He spent more time than ever locked in his room. If I entered a room he was in, he would find a reason to leave. He was her guardian now, her silent protector. He had drawn a line in the sand, and I was on the other side. It hurt more than I could have imagined. I had changed his diapers. I had taught him how to throw a baseball. I had sat with him through scary movies and helped him with his homework. I loved him as my own. To have him look at me with such contempt was a constant, twisting knife in my gut. I had tried once or twice to talk to him, to explain. Ethan, it's more complicated than you think. But he would just shake his head, a curtain of indifference falling over his face. I don't care, he'd say. Just be nice to my mom. My impending retirement, once a source of excitement, now loomed like a threat. The idea of being home all day, trapped in this silent, tense house, filled me with a sense of dread. The base, with its rigid structure and familiar faces, had become my only refuge. Dave was my lifeline. We met for coffee every few days, the diner becoming my confessional. I finally told him everything, the words spilling out of me in a torrent of pain and confusion. The secret closet, the debt, Ethan's reaction. I laid it all bare on the sticky Formica tabletop. He didn't judge. He just listened, his expression grim. Wow, he said when I was finished, letting out a long breath. That's a whole other level, man. Tell me what to do, Dave, I pleaded. I'm lost. I feel like my entire life is a lie. You can't fix this with a tactical plan, Liam, he said, stirring his coffee. This isn't an objective to be secured. This is a person. Your wife. She's drowning. And yeah, she's trying to pull you under with her, but she's still drowning. He leaned forward. You guys need to talk. For real. Not yelling, not accusing. You need a third party. A professional. A marriage counselor. I recoiled at the word. A counselor? Isn't that for people who are getting a divorce? It's for people who don't want to get a divorce, he corrected me gently. Look, you're both hurt. You're both dug into your trenches. You need someone to wave a white flag and get you to talk on neutral ground. And the debt, that's a whole other beast. You need a financial advisor, too. You can't ignore it. It's not going to go away. His advice was sound. It was logical. But the thought of sitting in a sterile office, airing our dirtiest laundry to a complete stranger, felt like the ultimate failure. It was admitting that we, as a couple, had failed. But what was the alternative? To keep living like this? To let the silence and the resentment fester until there was nothing left to save? That weekend, I decided to tackle a project I'd been putting off for years, cleaning out the garage. It was a mess of old furniture, forgotten toys, and boxes of things we hadn't looked at in a decade. I needed the physical labor, the mindless work. I needed to feel like I could fix something, even if it was just a cluttered space. I spent hours sorting through junk, creating piles for trash and donation. Maya came out to help, which mostly involved her rediscovering old toys and asking me a million questions about them. Her cheerful presence was a small balm on my wounded spirit. Ethan, of course, was nowhere to be seen. In the back corner, behind an old lawnmower and a stack of tires, was a tower of dusty cardboard boxes. They were Chloe's. They were marked, Chloe's things, pre-Liam. They had moved with us from base to base, from house to house, for 15 years, always relegated to a dusty corner, unopened. Curiosity, or maybe a desperate search for answers, got the better of me. I sliced open the tape on the top box. The smell of old paper and memories filled the air. Inside were college textbooks. Psychology. Art history. Sociology. I hadn't known she was interested in those things. I opened the next box. This one was different. It wasn't full of books. It was full of her. The person she was before me. There were sketchpads filled with surprisingly good drawings of furniture and room layouts. There were stacks of magazines, Architectural Digest, Elle Decor with pages folded down, corners marked, notes scribbled in the margins. Love this color palette, one note said. Perfect chair for a reading nook, said another. At the bottom of the box, I found it. A worn, leather-bound journal. Her name, Chloe Williams, was embossed on the cover in faded gold leaf. My hand trembled as I opened it. Her handwriting was youthful, a loopy, optimistic script. The entries were from the year before we met. She was 21, a single mom to a baby Ethan, working part-time as a waitress and taking design classes at the local community college. The pages were filled with her dreams. She wrote about her passion for creating spaces that felt like home, about textures and light and the psychology of color. She wrote about her ambition to one day open her own small interior design firm. Williams Designs, she had written, trying it out. Chloe Williams Interiors. Her dreams were so clear, so vivid, so full of hope. I read about her struggles, too. The exhaustion of juggling a baby, a job, and school. The loneliness. The constant worry about money. Then, I turned a page, and my own name appeared. Met a guy tonight. He's in the Air Force. Name is Liam. He was so sweet to Ethan. I kept reading, my heart aching. I saw her dreams slowly begin to shift. The entries about design became less frequent. They were replaced by entries about me. About our dates. About how safe I made her feel. About how I was so good with her son. He wants to build a life with me, she wrote. A real family. I love him so much. But what about school? What about my designs? The last entry was dated a week before we got married. Liam is my future, it read. Ethan's future. It's the right choice. It's a different kind of dream, but it's a good one. It has to be. I'll pack my sketchbooks away for now. Maybe someday. I closed the journal. The garage was dim, the afternoon light filtering through the grimy window. I sat on an overturned bucket, surrounded by the ghosts of a life she had given up. A life I never even knew she wanted. Someday. That someday had never come. She had packed away her dreams in a cardboard box and followed me around the world. She had traded Chloe Williams Interiors for Master Sergeant Carter's wife. And I had let her. I had been so wrapped up in my own career, my own mission, that I had never thought to ask about the dreams she had packed away. What do I have, Liam? What is mine? Now, I finally understood the question. She wasn't talking about purses and shoes. She was talking about a lost part of her soul. The weight of that realization was crushing. My anger at her deception was still there, but now it was tangled with a profound, suffocating guilt. The problem wasn't just her spending. The problem was us. It was me. I walked back into the house, my legs feeling heavy. The mail was on the small table by the door. I sifted through it absently. Bills, junk mail, a flyer for a pizza place. And then I saw it. An official-looking envelope, addressed to Chloe. It was from a collection agency. The red, past due, stamp was a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a credit card statement anymore. This was the next level. This was the consequence. I stood in the hallway, holding the ghost of her past dreams in my mind and the stark reality of our present crisis in my hand. The two were inextricably linked. Dave was right. We couldn't keep going like this. The silence wasn't healing us, it was killing us. We were at a precipice, and I had to be the one to decide if we were going to fall, or if we were going to try, somehow, to find a way back to solid ground. That evening, I didn't retreat into silence. I didn't let the tension dictate the terms of our existence. I waited until the kids were in their rooms, the house settling into its familiar nightly quiet. Chloe was in the living room, curled up on the sofa, aimlessly flipping through the channels. The flickering light of the television painted her face in shifting shades of blue and gray. She looked small and lost. I walked into the room and turned off the TV. The sudden silence was a physical presence. She looked up at me, her body instantly tensing, preparing for another fight. I didn't say a word. I walked over to the coffee table and gently placed two things upon its surface. First, the worn leather journal. Second, the unopened letter from the collection agency. They sat side by side, a relic of her past and a threat to our future. Her eyes widened as she saw them. She stared at the journal, then at the envelope, a dawning horror on her face. Her gaze shot up to meet mine, and for the first time in weeks, there was no anger or defensiveness in her eyes. There was only raw, unadulterated fear. I pulled the armchair closer and sat down, my knees almost touching hers. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't use an accusatory tone. I spoke quietly, my voice filled with a weariness that went bone deep. I found the journal in the garage, I said softly. I read it. And this came in the mail today. I tapped the envelope. We can't do this anymore, Chloe. The silence, the pretending. It's breaking us. It's breaking me. I took a breath, the hardest I'd ever taken. Tell me what's really going on. No more lies. No more hiding. Just tell me. Help me understand. It was as if I had pulled a pin from a grenade she had been holding for 15 years. Her face crumpled. A sob tore from her throat, a ragged, painful sound that seemed to carry all the weight of her secrets. She didn't try to hide it. She bent forward, her forehead resting on her knees, and wept. Not the panicked tears of being caught, but the deep, soul-shattering sobs of surrender. I didn't move. I just sat there and let her cry, giving her the space to let it all out. The sound filled the room, the only sound in our broken, quiet house. It went on for minutes that felt like hours. I fought every instinct I had to reach out and comfort her, knowing that this was something she had to go through on her own. Finally, the sobs subsided into shaky, hitching breaths. She sat up, wiping her eyes with the back of her hands like a child. Her face was red and puffy, her composure completely gone. She looked exhausted. "I'm so sorry, Liam," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry." "I know," I said. "Just talk to me." And she did. The words came out in a broken, halting flood, a confession that had been dammed up for years. She told me it started small. A lipstick here, a new blouse there. Things to make her feel a little better during the long, lonely months of my first deployment. It was a little secret, a little thrill. Something just for her. She told me how the lie grew. When we moved to a new base, she felt invisible. The other wives seemed so polished, so put together. They talked about their book clubs and their charity work. Chloe felt like an outsider, a young mom with a community college background and no pedigree. The shopping was her armor. A designer handbag made her feel like she fit in. A new pair of shoes gave her the confidence to walk into a room full of strangers. It was never about the things, she said, her voice trembling as she looked at me, her eyes pleading for me to understand. It was about the feeling. When the cashier would wrap it in tissue paper and put it in a beautiful bag, for that one moment, I felt valued. Important. Like I was worth all that fancy packaging. She told me how my career success became a strange kind of pressure. The more I was promoted, the more was expected of her as an officer's wife. The social functions, the dinners, she felt like she was playing a role she had never been taught the lines for. The clothes were her costume. They helped her feel less like an imposter. Then, the debt started to spiral. She got a credit card without telling me, promising herself she would pay it off quickly. But she never could. So she got another one to pay off the first one. The lies got bigger, the hole deeper. It became a monster living in our house that only she could see. Every time you came home from a deployment, she whispered, twisting the hem of her shirt, I was so happy to see you. But I was also terrified. Terrified you would find out. That you would see who I really was. A fraud. A failure who was burying us in debt. Her words painted a picture of a life I had lived alongside but had never truly seen. A life of quiet desperation, of profound loneliness and insecurity. I had seen a competent, loving wife who ran our household flawlessly. But I had been blind to the fear that drove her, the emptiness she was trying so desperately to fill with things. When you talked about me getting a job, she continued, her voice barely audible, it felt like my whole world was collapsing. My only identity, the only thing I was good at, was being a stay-at-home mom. And you were telling me it wasn't enough. And I panicked. Because if I wasn't a mom, and I wasn't a military wife anymore, who was I? I was just Chloe. A woman with no degree, no job history, and a mountain of secret debt. I was worthless. I couldn't let you see that. Her confession didn't erase the damage, but it reframed it. This wasn't a malicious act of greed. It was a cry for help that had been muffled for over a decade. And the journal? I asked softly, nodding toward the coffee table. The designs? A fresh wave of tears welled in her eyes. I loved it so much, she said. But I was 21 with a baby. And then I met you. You were solid. You were safe. You offered us a future. It felt selfish, to still want my silly little dream when you were offering me a real life. So I packed it away. I told myself it didn't matter. But it never really went away. It just sat there, in the back of my mind, reminding me of the person I could have been. We sat in the wreckage of her confession, the ugly truth finally laid bare between us. There was no going back to the way things were. The illusion of our perfect life was shattered forever. But in the rubble, for the first time, there was a chance to build something real. Okay, I said, the word feeling solid and sure in my mouth. Okay. We're going to fix this. Together. She looked up at me, surprise and a flicker of hope in her teary eyes. Really? Really, I affirmed. Tomorrow, you are going to call that number. I pointed to the letter from the collection agency. You are going to tell them you intend to pay. Then, you and I are going to sit down and gather up every single credit card bill, every statement. We need to know the exact number. The full truth. No more hiding. She nodded, a small, jerky movement. And then, I continued, my voice steady, we are going to make an appointment with a financial counselor. And with a marriage counselor. She flinched at the last part. Oh, Liam. No, I said firmly but gently. This isn't just about money, Chloe. You know that. This is about us. We're broken. And I don't know how to fix us on my own. We need help. There's no shame in that. I reached across the small space between us and, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I took her hand. It was cold and trembling. I squeezed it gently. I'm not leaving, I said. I'm angry, and I'm hurt. But I'm not leaving. But we have to do the work. Both of us. She squeezed my hand back, her grip surprisingly strong. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but this one felt different. It wasn't a tear of sorrow or fear. It felt like a tear of relief. The truth, as ugly and painful as it was finally out. And we were still here. Still together. The storm had broken, and we were left standing in the quiet devastation, with the monumental task of rebuilding ahead of us. It was terrifying. But it was better than the silence. The day after the confession was like waking up after a devastating storm. The sky was clear, but the landscape was irrevocably changed. Debris was everywhere. The air was heavy with the smell of rain and upturned earth. There was a strange new clarity to everything, but the path forward was littered with obstacles. True to my word, we started the work. The first step was the hardest. I sat with Chloe at the kitchen table as she made the call to the collection agency. Her hand trembled so much she could barely dial the numbers. I saw her clench her jaw, her knuckles white as she held the phone to her ear. I heard the forced, shaky politeness in her voice as she spoke to the person on the other end. Yes, my name is Chloe Carter. I'm calling about an account. I didn't listen to the details. I just watched her face. I saw the shame, the fear, but also a flicker of something new, resolve. She was facing the monster. For the first time, she wasn't running from it. After the call, we began the grim task of what I started calling the financial reckoning. Chloe went through her hiding spots, the back of the closet, under the bed, in drawers I never opened, and produced a stack of credit card statements that made my stomach clench. We spread them out on the dining room table, a mosaic of our financial ruin. One by one, we went through them, adding up the balances. The number grew at an alarming rate. With each new statement, I felt a fresh wave of sickness, but I pushed it down. I refused to get angry. Anger was a luxury we couldn't afford right now. I focused on the task, on the numbers, treating it like a mission briefing. Assess the damage. Quantify the threat. Formulate a plan. The final number was worse than I had imagined. It was a staggering, suffocating amount of debt. Enough to buy a new car. Enough for a down payment on a small house. It was the sum of 15 years of secret pain and fear, translated into dollars and cents. Seeing it all laid out, a single, terrifying number on a calculator screen, Chloe broke down again. I'm so sorry, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I've ruined us. This time, I did reach for her. I put my arm around her shoulder. No, I said, my voice firm. You didn't ruin us. We got broken. This is just a symptom. It's a big, ugly, expensive symptom, but it's not the disease. We can fix the number. We have to fix us. The next calls were to a financial advisor Dave recommended and to a marriage counselor whose name we found online. Making those appointments felt like a surrender and a step forward all at once. It was an admission of failure, but also an act of hope. The kids knew something had changed. The icy tension had been replaced by a fragile, sober quiet. There was no more yelling, but there were no more fake smiles either. Maya seemed relieved, sensing that the silent war was over, even if she didn't understand its cause. She was warmer, more talkative, as if the air in the house was finally breathable again. Ethan was a different story. He remained wary, watchful. He saw me being gentle with his mother, saw us talking in low voices at the kitchen table. He saw the tears, but he also saw that I wasn't the cause of them anymore. His hostility softened into a guarded confusion. He stopped making a point of leaving rooms when I entered. He would even occasionally meet my eye. It was a small change, but it felt monumental. He was no longer her soldier. He was an observer, waiting to see if the truce was real. Our first session with the marriage counselor, Dr. Albright, was excruciating. We sat on a comfortable-looking sofa that felt like a witness stand. I explained my side of the story, starting with my retirement and the fateful conversation about her getting a job. I tried to be fair, to own my clumsiness, my blindness to her feelings. Then it was Chloe's turn. With Dr. Albright's gentle prompting, she told her story again. The loneliness, the insecurity, the way the shopping became an addiction, a way to self-medicate her eroding sense of self. Saying it all out loud in front of a stranger gave it a new, painful weight. I watched her, and I saw not just a wife who had deceived me, but a woman who had been profoundly lost and alone for a very long time. Liam, Dr. Albright said, turning to me, her gaze kind but direct. For 15 years, your identity was clear. You were a soldier. Your mission was defined. Chloe's identity was Liam's wife. When you retired, you were gaining a new life, a life at home. But from her perspective, she was losing the only identity she had. The conversation you initiated, while well-intentioned, confirmed her deepest fear, that without that title, she was disposable. Her words landed with the force of a physical blow. Disposable. I had made my wife, my partner, the mother of my children, feel disposable. The guilt was a heavy cloak. The financial counseling was less emotional but just as brutal. A kind, no-nonsense woman named Maria laid out our new reality. We created a spreadsheet, tracking every penny. We went on a scorched earth budget. No more takeout. No more subscriptions we didn't need. No more incidental spending. My pension was decent, but it would have to be stretched to its absolute limit to start chipping away at the mountain of debt Chloe had created. Maria also gave Chloe an assignment: return everything she could. Every unworn dress, every pair of shoes still in the box, every handbag with the tag still on. That Saturday was one of the strangest and most painful days of my life. I loaded the back of my truck with thousands of dollars of designer merchandise. Chloe sat in the passenger seat, silent, her face pale. We drove to the high-end mall, the epicenter of her secret life. We walked into the first boutique together. The air was perfumed and quiet. Well-dressed saleswomen eyed us with polite smiles. Chloe walked to the counter, her shoulders slumped, and placed a handbag on the polished marble surface. "I'd like to return this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. As the saleswoman processed the return, I watched Chloe. She was looking around the store, not with longing, but with a kind of sad detachment, as if seeing it for the first time for what it was, just a room full of expensive objects. It held no power over her anymore. The magic was gone. We did this at 4 different stores. At each one, a piece of the shame seemed to fall away from her, replaced by a grim determination. With every refund receipt she tucked into her purse, it felt like she was reclaiming a small piece of herself, of her future. The final stop was the store where she had bought the red-soled shoes. As she placed the box on the counter, the salesman who had likely sold them to her looked at her with a flicker of recognition. "Changing your mind?" he asked, a hint of condescension in his tone. Chloe lifted her chin. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and steady. "Yes," she said, looking him directly in the eye. "I've decided I prefer shoes I can actually walk in." It was the first time I had seen a spark of the old, fiery Chloe in weeks. A small smile touched my lips. In the truck on the way home, a comfortable silence fell between us. The bed of the truck was empty. The total on the refund receipts was substantial. It was a drop in the ocean of our debt, but it was a start. It was an ending. "Thank you," she said softly, not looking at me. "For coming with me. I couldn't have done that alone." "We're doing this together," I said. It was becoming our mantra. That night, after dinner, I saw something that nearly brought me to my knees. I was in the living room, reading a book. Chloe was at the dining room table with her laptop, researching budget-friendly recipes. Ethan came downstairs. I braced myself for his usual indifference. But he didn't walk past me. He walked to the dining room table. He stopped beside his mother, hesitating for a moment. Then, he silently placed something next to her laptop. It was one of her old sketchbooks from the box in the garage. He had also laid a set of new, professional-looking drawing pencils beside it. Chloe looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. She looked at the sketchbook, then at her son. A slow, radiant smile spread across her face, a real smile, the first one I'd seen in a month. It lit up her whole face. "I thought maybe you'd want these," Ethan mumbled, his cheeks turning red. He wouldn't look at her. He just shuffled his feet, suddenly looking like a 12-year-old again instead of a stoic teenager. "Thank you, sweetie," Chloe said, her voice thick with emotion. "That's the nicest gift I've ever gotten." Ethan just shrugged, gave a quick, awkward nod in my direct Iona silent acknowledgement, a truce, and then fled back upstairs. Chloe opened the sketchbook. She ran her hand over the old drawings, a look of profound, wistful sadness on her face. Then, she picked up one of the new pencils. She hesitated for a long moment. Then, on a fresh, blank page, she began to draw. A simple, clean line. A shape. A new beginning. I watched her, my heart so full it felt like it might burst. The debt was real. The hurt was real. But this moment of grace, of hope, of quiet creation, this was real, too. And it was worth fighting for. The act of Chloe picking up that pencil was more than a symbolic gesture, it was a seismic shift. It was the first, tentative step out of the wreckage and onto a new, unpaved road. The house began to breathe again. The silence was no longer heavy with unspoken words but filled with the quiet scratch of her pencil on paper, the methodical chopping of vegetables for a home-cooked meal, the low murmur of our conversations about budgets and feelings instead of weather and errands. My retirement day came and went with little fanfare. There was a small ceremony on base, a plaque, a firm handshake from my commanding officer, and handshakes from men I had served with for 2 decades. I packed the contents of my desk into a single cardboard box. As I drove away from the base for the last time, I didn't feel the panic I had anticipated. I wasn't leaving a refuge anymore. I was just going home. My new life as a stay-at-home dad began in earnest. And I quickly learned that my confident assumption that it wasn't a full-time job was the height of military arrogance and ignorance. It was a different kind of hard. It wasn't the acute, adrenaline-fueled difficulty of a mission, but a chronic, low-grade, relentless demand on my time, patience, and energy. There was the endless cycle of laundry, the strategic planning of meals, the mental gymnastics of keeping track of everyone's schedules. There was being the point of contact for the school, navigating the complex social dramas Maya would download onto me the moment she got in the car, and trying to find a way to connect with a still-guarded Ethan. It was a job that required a different skill set, not command and control, but diplomacy, emotional intelligence, and a level of multitasking I had never truly appreciated. One afternoon, Maya came home from school, her face thunderous. She threw her backpack on the floor and burst into tears. Her best friend, Sarah, had decided she was no longer her best friend and had instead aligned with the enemy, a girl named Jessica. I sat with her on the sofa for an hour, listening to the intricate and devastating politics of 12-year-old girls. I didn't offer solutions. I just listened, made her hot chocolate, and told her that her feelings were valid. It was exhausting and emotionally draining, and at the end of it, I felt like I had just run a marathon. Later that evening, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, Chloe came and stood beside me. "You did a good job with her today," she said quietly. "I didn't do anything," I said, rinsing a plate. "I just listened." "That's not nothing, Liam," she said, her voice soft. That's everything. In those moments, a new kind of respect grew between us. She saw me struggling and succeeding in the role she had held for so long. And I finally, truly, understood the invisible labor that had underpinned our family's life for 15 years. Chloe, in the meantime, was undergoing her own transformation. She enrolled in an online interior design certification program. The first few weeks were hard. She was older than most of the other students, and her confidence was shaky. She would spend hours staring at a blank screen, convinced she had forgotten everything, that her talent had atrophied and died in that dusty box in the garage. "I can't do this," she said one night, closing her laptop in frustration. "My ideas are dated. I don't know the software. I'm too old to be starting over." "You're not starting over," I told her, sitting beside her at the dining room table that had become her new office. "You're picking up where you left off. Just show me the assignment." The project was to create a mood board for a client's living room. She showed me the fake client profile, a young couple who liked modern but cozy designs. "What does that even mean?" she sighed. "It's so vague." "Okay, so what would you do?" I asked. "If it were your project, your design." No right or wrong answer. Just what would you do? She hesitated, then started talking. She talked about texturisa nubby wool rug, a soft linen sofa, a smooth wooden coffee table. She talked about a color palette: warm grays, deep blues, and a pop of terracotta. She talked about creating a space that felt collected over time, not bought all at once from a catalog. As she spoke, the passion I had read about in her journal came to life. Her eyes lit up. Her hands moved, sketching shapes in the air. She wasn't a student anymore. She was a designer. "That," I said when she finished. "That's what you do. Put that on the page." It was a turning point for her. She started to trust her own instincts again. She spent her days studying, drawing, and immersing herself in this world she had left behind. The house started to change. She shopped our house, rearranging furniture, painting an accent wall in the living room with a $5 can of Poops paint from the hardware store, and creating a beautiful gallery wall with framed pictures of the kids and some of her own abstract sketches. She was making our house a home in a way she never had before, not with money, but with creativity and love. Our sessions with Dr. Albright continued. They were our weekly check-in, our safe space to navigate the minefield of our new reality. We learned to communicate, to use "I feel" statements instead of "you did" accusations. I learned to validate her feelings without immediately trying to solve her problems. She learned to express her needs and fears directly, without resorting to passive aggression or secret coping mechanisms. One session, Dr. Albright asked us to talk about forgiveness. "I'm trying," I said honestly. "Most days, I think I'm there. I understand the why now. But sometimes I'll be paying a bill online, and I'll see that debt number, and the anger comes roaring back. The feeling of being betrayed. It's hard to just let that go." Chloe just nodded, her eyes full of a familiar shame. "Forgiveness isn't a one-time event, Liam," Dr. Albright said. "It's not a switch you flip. It's a choice you have to make every single day. Some days it will be easy. Some days it will feel impossible. You don't have to forget what happened to forgive it. You just have to choose to not let it define your future." That night, I lay in bed, watching Chloe sleep. For so long after the discovery, I had looked at her and seen a stranger. Now, I was starting to see her again. Not the idealized version I had held in my head for years, but the real her. A woman who was flawed and complicated, strong and fragile. A woman who had made a terrible series of mistakes born from a place of deep pain. A woman who was now fighting, every single day, to be better, to heal herself and to heal us. I thought about Dr. Albright's words. A choice you make every single day. I looked at the woman beside me, the mother of my children, the partner who was working so hard to find her way back to herself, and back to me. The anger felt distant, a faint echo from a battle that was already over. In its place was a quiet, profound love. It wasn't the easy, untested love of our youth. It was a stronger, more resilient love, forged in fire and tempered by truth. It was scarred, but it was real. And in the quiet of the night, I made the choice. I chose forgiveness. I chose us. I reached out and took her hand, and for the first time in months, it felt like coming home. The months that followed were a testament to the slow, unglamorous work of rebuilding. Our lives settled into a new rhythm, one dictated not by military schedules or secret anxieties, but by shared responsibilities and a fragile, growing trust. We still had bad days. There were times when the weight of the debt felt suffocating, when an innocent comment would accidentally touch a raw nerve and a flicker of the old tension would return. But the difference now was that we didn't let it fester. We talked. We used the tools Dr. Albright had given us. We chose, again and again, to face the problem together. Chloe flourished in her design course. Her confidence grew with every project she completed, every piece of positive feedback she received. She started a design-focused social media account, posting pictures of our home projects, sharing budget-friendly design tips, and writing about her journey back to a long-lost passion. It was a small account, followed mostly by friends and a handful of strangers, but it was hers. It was her voice, her vision. She was building something from the ground up, something that had nothing to do with being my wife or a mother, and everything to do with being Chloe Williams Carter. One afternoon, I came home from grocery shopping to find her in the living room with Sarah's mom, a woman from the neighborhood named Jessica. They had a laptop open between them on the coffee table, and Chloe was animatedly explaining something about color theory, pointing to different swatches on the screen. Jessica is thinking of redoing her home office, Chloe explained to me, a proud, nervous smile on her face. She saw my posts and asked if I could help her with some ideas. It was her first unofficial client. A small, unpaid project for a neighbor. But as I watched her, confidently explaining her vision, her face glowing with passion, I knew it was the beginning of everything. She wasn't hiding behind expensive things to feel valuable anymore. She was creating value, with her own talent and hard work. My relationship with Ethan continued its slow thaw. The turning point had been the gift of the sketchbook, but the healing came in small, everyday moments. It came when he asked for my help with his math homework and didn't flinch when I sat beside him. It came when he started talking about his day at the dinner table, occasionally even directing a comment or a question at me. One Saturday, I was in the garage trying to fix a wobbly leg on an old chair. Ethan appeared in the doorway, watching me struggle with a clamp. "You're doing it wrong," he said, his tone matter of fact, not insolent. "The pressure's uneven. It's going to split the wood." He came over, took the clamp from my hand, and repositioned it. "You need to put a block here," he explained, grabbing a piece of scrap wood. "To distribute the force." He was right. It worked perfectly. "Where'd you learn that?" I asked, genuinely impressed. He shrugged. "YouTube. I watch a lot of woodworking videos." It was the most he had volunteered about his interests in years. We spent the next hour working on the chair together, a comfortable silence between us punctuated by requests for a screwdriver or a piece of sandpaper. We weren't just a stepfather and a rebellious teen anymore. We were just two guys, fixing a chair. When we were done, he looked at our handiwork and gave a small, satisfied nod. "Looks good," he said. "Yeah," I agreed, looking at him. "It does." A bridge had been built, out of wood glue and shared silence. A year after the discovery in the closet, our life was unrecognizable. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. We were still paying off the debt, a monthly reminder of the past, but it no longer felt like a life sentence. It was just a problem we were solving, together. We had graduated from weekly marriage counseling to monthly check-ins. We didn't need the constant guidance anymore. We had learned to navigate on our own. One evening, I was sitting on the back porch, watching the sun set. The air was cool and pleasant. Chloe came out and sat beside me, handing me a glass of iced tea. She had a piece of paper in her other hand. It was a certificate. She had officially completed her interior design program. "I did it," she said, her voice quiet, filled with a profound sense of accomplishment. "I never had a doubt," I told her, and I meant it. I wrapped my arm around her shoulder, and she leaned her head against me. We sat there for a long time, watching the colors of the sky fade from orange to purple. "You know," she said, her voice thoughtful, in a strange way, "your clumsy, terribly phrased suggestion that I get a job it might have saved us." I looked down at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "It almost destroyed us. It started the avalanche," she explained. "I had built this huge, unstable mountain of secrets. And you came along and poked it with a stick. It was terrifying when it all came crashing down. But maybe it needed to. Maybe that was the only way to clear the path. The only way for us to find what was underneath." I thought about that. About the pain, the anger, the betrayal. About the quiet desperation that had lived in our house for so long. She was right. The confrontation, as brutal as it was, had been necessary. It had forced the poison out into the open where we could finally deal with it. Maya came out onto the porch, interrupting our thoughts. "Mom, Ethan's showing me how to use your design software. He says he can build a 3D model of my dream bedroom." She was beaming. Chloe and I exchanged a look, a silent communication that spoke volumes. It was a look of shared history, of shared struggle, and of a deep, abiding love that had been tested and had not only survived, but had become stronger. The road ahead was still long. There were financial hurdles to overcome, new challenges to face as the kids grew older, and scars that would likely always remain. But we were no longer walking on separate paths, pretending they led to the same destination. We were walking hand in hand, on the same road, navigating by a new map we were drawing together. I looked at my familiarly brilliant, creative wife finding her purpose, my kind, bright daughter, my quiet, thoughtful son who was slowly finding his own way to connect. This was my life. Not the one I had planned, not the one I thought I had, but something far more complex, more challenging, and infinitely more precious. The debt we were paying off to the credit card companies was one thing. But we had also been paying off a quiet debt to each other for years, a debt of unspoken truths, of unseen sacrifices, of unmet needs. And we were finally, balancing the ledger.